Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here. We are starting to study. Tonight's discussion would be chapters 32 in Tanya. Before I begin, I want to share with you a short introduction. Actually, chapter 32 is totally out of context from before and after. And the sequence the Rebbe wrote the Tanya, 32 was not included. He only added 32 after. 32, if you translate into letters, if you read it as the chapter, is Lamed Bet. Lamed Bet is Lev, heart. So this chapter was added as the heart of Tanya. It's all inclusive. Whatever we discover until now and what we are about to discover by continuing to study is summarized, or it's the pinnacle of the entire Tanya. The main theme of this actually, as I say, is out of context. Until now, we studied few crucial points in a good spiritual life. I'm going to concentrate on two because they're going to be the main theme of our discussion. One is joy. In order for us to serve God, we must have joy in our life. And number two, we spoke about how to crush the body or the animal soul. At first, the one chapter, the rabbi, 2-3 chapters ago, the rabbi was talking about like a big piece of wood that you have to chop it into small pieces. So the body, sometimes we need to yell at the body, scream at the body, use negativity for the negativity of the body. You take times out to concentrate on how far we are from God and turn sadness into bitterness. But bitterness also is a gvura, is a strictness, not kindness. These are the main two themes we talked about until now. The rabbi is going to share with us that loving a fellow Jew is actually the essence of our life and the greatest way to serve God. So I'm sharing with you some points of the content so that when we read we can move fast. The rabbi is saying that if we are paying attention to our soul, we all are part of one large soul. So if someone is separated from me, I do not consider that person, he or she, to be part of my existence. I actually am chopping off part of myself. And there is no true joy. The rabbi is going to talk about, as I'll share in a moment, about 4 different points the rabbi is going to make in chapter 32. But the idea is that we have body and soul, yin and yang, opposites each other. And when we pay attention to our body, it harms us. It hurts us from connecting. When we pay attention to the soul, we bond and unite. But before I even get there and show with you a story that will summarize the chapter, I want to go a little earlier than that. Because for me, it is a very powerful point. And that's the idea of joy. I'm speaking about true joy, not watching comedy on YouTube. True internal joy when we are thankful to God for all that He has blessed us with and the challenges as well. And I want to share with you something I just discovered in last week's Torah portion. We just read the portion of Yitro. Yitro is the father-in-law of Moshe. He did not see Moshe for about 2 years. Tzipporah, his daughter, Moshe's wife, was with him and the children, and now he's bringing them back. When they meet, they have a party. Moshe is greeted them with a nice party. Everybody joined the party. The next morning, he watches how Moshe is sitting in his tent, and he is delivering God's message to people who had disputes or questions, and people stay in line for days on. He turned to Moshe and he asked him, why are you doing that? And Moshe says, they come in to ask for God's word. They want to know what's right, what's wrong. And Yitro says to Moshe, this is wrong. You will fall apart. The people will fall apart. and there is no good ending to nobody. Instead, what he tells them is what we call delegation. Appoint judges, train judges, one for each 1,000, one for each 100, one for 50, one for 10. And when someone has a question, they go to the one on top of it, of those 10, asks the question. If he doesn't know, he moves it up to the 50, to one of 100, to one of 1,000. If a judge in charge of 1,000 men is unable to solve the problem, then they bring it to you. And we read that Moshe accepted it after consulting God, and he appointed those judges. By the way, I heard and I said, to me it was a big shock. Joshua, the next Jewish leader, was actually one of those judges. He was a judge of 50. So you can imagine the personality and the holiness of those judges, or 100 or 1,000. They were way above Joshua. But back to the point that I want to make. I read this week, a commentator, I wish I had the name because I should mention his name. In the words of Yitro, he said to him something that's very peculiar. He says to him, now, listen to me. I will advise you, but let God be with you. In the Hebrew text, it reads, it tells him, if you listen to me, God will be with you. And the commentators ask, what do you mean God will be with you? God is with Moshe all the time. God was with Moshe and God will be with Moshe. How is it possible Yitro tell Moshe that if he listens to him, it will depend on accepting the advice? That's when God will be with you. One commentator explained that God does not rest to anyone who is unhappy. And therefore Yitro turns to Moshe and he says, it's impossible for you to remain joyous because you're going to be so overworked. After a while, you lose your mind and start catching your tail. And by doing so, you'll forget what joy is about. Because anybody who says to you, why aren't you happy? You'll say, why am I not happy? I have no time to be happy. I have so much. People are waiting for 8 days to see me. I can't even catch my breath. So Yitro turned to him and says, God will not appear to someone who's not happy. You have to be a happy person, so God be with you. And therefore, you must delegate. You must allow other people to take some of the burden. And by doing so, you are able to enjoy life. When I share that, I want to add that today, psychology, therapists, counselors is delegation. So when someone feels that they carry a burden, and sometimes it's for real, or many times it's for real, nobody's judging, but sometimes it's for real. We need to understand that even Moshe, who estimated that he can carry the burden, he listened to God by delegating. We need also to learn to delegate and allow for a spouse, for children, for friends, or professionals to assist us so that we remain joyous. Another one, a lighter story dedicated to Ali. There was a very well-known Chassid, Rabbi Chaim Margaliot. He was a Ilui. How do you translate Ilui, Harry? A genius. He was a genius and very well-to-do financially. In other words, he had a very high IQ, and he used it for Torah study. One day, a very, very expensive vase of glass and gold that was one of a kind, and they spent on it hundreds of thousands of dollars because he was able to, fell and broke. And his wife started crying because she was very upset about the loss of the item. But he remained steadfast, continued studying, and didn't bother him. So it enraged his wife. She turned to him and says, Ephraim, don't you have a sensitivity to what's going on here? Aren't you upset about what had just happened? He turned to her, he says, yeah, I am sensitive. So she says, how come you're not upset? You're not crying? You're not going and say, oy vey, we'll never have. He says, I can explain it, but I cannot do it now. I'll do it in a year's time. In next year, this time, you turn to me and I'll give you the explanation. So she said, okay, she respects her husband. A year went by, and she remembered, and she turned to him, and she says, remember last year, I was all zudrudled. I was all brokenhearted. I went out of myself. I lost my mind, and you didn't. And you told me that you have a good reason, but it will take a year for you to explain it. Here is a year. No, a genius does not forget. So he said to her, do you know, let me just do it in the right order. He said to her, does it bother you now? She said, no. He said to her, why? He said, because it's a long time ago. It happened a year ago. He says, do you know your father took me as a son-in-law? Her father found him because he was a genius. So he said, why did your father pick me to you as your husband? Because she said to him, because you're a genius. He says, you know what the difference between a genius and an ordinary person? A genius is able to grasp in a short period what takes people to grasp in a long period. So when the vase broke, I said to myself, in a year's time, it won't matter. Therefore, why should I be upset? But for you, it took a while for you to realize that and to calm down. And when I read that story a couple of weeks ago, I said to myself, I have to share that because it helps you put things in perspective. It helps you realize that whenever things happen, it should not stop joy because most of the times it's temporary. So if you can imagine and say to yourself, in a week's time, in a month's time, will it matter? If the answer is no, then it shouldn't matter now either. That's one story. Now I want to get to this chapter. And I'm going to show you a story, but the story will play out in the chapter, in the Tanya. However, before we begin the reading, I want to quiz you on the story. There was a king who was blessed with a child. Unfortunately, the child lost his leg and his eye, his vision in one eye. One day, the king commissioned painters to paint a portrait of the son, a beautiful painting he wanted. And there was a competition. And finally, there were 3 candidates, the 3 top painters. And he ordered them to, each one was commissioned to paint a beautiful portrait of the son. Now they all had a dilemma. How should they paint the son? All 3 accepted the challenge. Here is the way they addressed the challenge. The first painter decided to ignore completely the defects, the deficiencies. He painted the king's son, the prince, like a perfect human being with 2 healthy eyes and 2 legs. The painting was beautiful, life for painting. The second painter decided to paint the king, the prince from the side. So from the side, the defects or the missing parts were missing. You can see, because from the side, you can only see one eye and one leg. And that was fine. So nobody can tell that the prince was missing a leg and is blind in one eye. The third one decided to do more than that. He went and painted the prince sitting, riding a horse, looking in a gun scope, as he's looking in the gun, so that it looks like he's a perfect human being, even though the other leg you didn't see because the other leg was on the other side of the horse. And looking in the eye, you can tell that the other eye was closed, so you can focus on the scope. Which one of the three was correct? Was the one that pleased the king the most? Anybody? So again, one painted, ignored the deficiencies, painted the king completely like a healthy human being. The other one put him on the side so that the parts that are not complementary are totally missing from the painting. And the third one painted him in a way that you don't even see those missing parts because he's riding a horse. Look, anybody? Number one. Why?
That's how he remembered him when he was okay.
That's how I remembered him. Okay. Anybody else?
I agree with
You agree with him?
the third one. Third.
Oh, you say the third. Why?
It's, it presents him without trying to hide the defects. It presents him in a way that shows that he is normal.
He present him the way he is normal. Okay.
Without trying to.
But he's actually cheating.
No,
Well, it's circumstantial.
no,
Why not?
because in that situation, that's what would be reality.
In
So
that
he engaged
situation,
in
it
the
is
life the way
the
that
full
he
reality, and there is no cheating involved.
Well,
Well, so to give you a hint, these all three are discussed in this chapter. The first one is the way Reb Zushe of Anipoli would see. The second one is Reb Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev. And the third one is the Alter Rebbe. And all of them, the Rebbe was going to go through this chapter and pointing out to each one of those three. So all of them are legitimate and correct, and we'll discover each one's benefit. I want to show that the chapter is divided into four. There are 4 points the rabbi wants to make. Number one, true love. How do we achieve true love? Number two, Hillel, and it's in the text in our Torah, tells us that loving a fellow human being encompasses the entire Torah. How is it possible that love a fellow man encompasses all the Torah? Number three, how is it possible to love a wicked person? After all, he may influence. If I love that person, he may influence me. Also, I won't have any effect on changing that person if I show him so much love. And the last one, the rabbi is going to talk about loving a person without giving them legitimacy for their conduct. And these are the four sections the rabbi is going to talk about. What? Without legitimizing his conduct, he or she. So the rabbi begins. Again, I cannot preface enough about joy. True joy comes from the soul. And the rabbi is going to explain why. I want to explain. As we read, I'm going to share with you a few more points. I'm reading the introduction. In the previous chapter, the Alter Rebbe thought that when one is bitterly remorseful over his sorry spiritual state, he must strive for joy by considering the following. True, on account of his body and his animal soul, he is utterly remote from godliness. Yet he has within him a divine soul, veritably a part of God. This soul in exile within the body and the animal soul is to be greatly pitied. One should therefore strive constantly to release it from the exile and to return it to its divine source through engaging in Torah and mitzvot. Such a return will bring one great joy, the joy of freedom, The knowledge that the body and the animal soul remain in their unfortunate state should not disturb one's joy on account of his divine soul, for the soul should be infinitely more precious in one's eyes. And we spoke about those points in great details. Says the Rebbe, I begin the text in chapter 32. Acting on the advice mentioned above, to view one's body with scorn and contempt, and to find joy in the joy of the soul alone, is a direct and easy path towards fulfilling the mitzvah of you shall love your fellow as yourself, with regards to every Jew, both great and small in spiritual stature. Since his body is despised and loathsome, he will not love himself on account of his body more than he loves his fellow. And as for the soul and spirit, the differences between his own soul and that of his fellow surely will not diminish the love between them. For who can know there the soul and the spirit's greatness and excellence in their source and root, the divine God? The Rabbi is telling us that when I put my body first, we call it conditional love. And for that I have a story. There was a very rich man who was always honored in synagogue to be called to the Torah. And then people honored him. He got the nicest aliyot. One day he got poor. He lost all his money. And of course, what happens when someone gets poor? He lost all his prestige and they stopped calling him. And thank God he returned back to be rich. And now they call him back to the Torah. So once they call him to the Torah, he goes up to the bima by the Torah, he takes out his checkbook, he writes a check, he puts it on the bima, he goes off, he goes down. So they say, Yanko, what are you doing? He says, I discovered that you're not honoring me, you're honoring my checkbook. So you didn't call me, you called my checkbook. So here is the check. Let the check get the honor. It must be on a Monday, yes, no doubt. Or Rosh Chodesh. Of course. The idea is, Mishnah teaches us, any love that depends on a condition, when the condition is gone, the love is gone. In other words, if the love comes from my body, we discovered in earlier chapter, I believe chapter 19, 20, that anytime I love somebody just for what they offer me, what's in it for me, it's not true love. Because the moment that person cannot provide anymore, I'm going to search for somebody else to provide me. When people get married, for example, if they look for the reasons to be married, which are what's in it for me, there is a good question whether the marriage will last. Because one day, that person that I married may not provide anymore. Somebody else might offer me a better deal. Therefore, we must have to allow for our soul to love a fellow. How do we use the soul? Realizing the soul is my true identity. And therefore, the soul is not looking for a condition or for a benefit. The soul is asking what God wants, what's good for God. So therefore, it does not depend on any condition. My body, no matter what my body wants, it's conditional. Therefore, we call it in Kabbalistic terminology, it's temporarily. It's not just sure, it's no sure that it's going to last. My soul, when my soul is operating, when I'm allowed in my soul to operate, it's non-conditional. Because I do what God wants. My soul wants to know what God wants. I think I shared with you before, the Rebbe, the Mittel Rebbe, the second Lubavitcher Rebbe once said, when two Jews meet, it's a great benefit to both. Why? Because you have two godly souls against one animal soul. Because you have two people, so it's two godly souls. But you have one animal soul. Each one has their own animal soul. And the question that comes, it should be two godly souls against two animal souls. After all, each one possesses an animal soul. Based on what we study, we discovered that my animal soul, all it cares is about what's in it for me. So it's not going to help you, animal soul. If we get together and start a conversation, my animal soul is interested in my own affairs, and I will have fun and enjoy life and honor and respect. It doesn't care about you desires and you happiness, and therefore it will be only two godly souls, because the godly souls want to serve God, and they know that helping the other is serving God. So you always have two godly souls against one animal soul, and the majority usually wins. And therefore, we need to, that's what the rabbi is making the distinction. Joy, true joy, does not come from the body. If you lust for something, if you desire something, once you get it, the animal soul goes up on and says, I need to be happy. I need to get something. I need to look better than anybody else. I need to be honored. And the animal soul does not stop. It keeps moving on and on. When it comes to the animal, a godly soul, on the other hand, the godly soul is about serving God. So if I'm given an opportunity to serve God, I should be extremely happy. Happy people are selfless people. Happy people who put God in front of them. So sometimes I want to study, but my kid needs a diaper change. That's how it should serve God. I do not get unhappy from it. Sometimes I need to spend time with a spouse, with a member, with a community, whatever it is that God wants me to do at this moment, it is serving God. And therefore, I should be happy and not do it begrudgingly, not do it with sadness, but quite the opposite. I have an opportunity to serve God. The only time I should not be happy is when I allow my animal soul to rule. Did I make myself clear? Ali?
Good.
You're good. Thank God. Let's continue. Therefore, says the Rebbe, true love is godly love, because it's not what's in it for me, but rather what does God wants. And therefore, connecting, helping, looking after, serving others is what serves God, is what pleases God, and therefore it makes me happy. How then can one claim that his soul is superior to his fellow? Therefore, when you see someone who is not as learned as you are, who is not as versed in the Hebrew language, in my case, or not as is richer than you, or is more successful, he has a much easier life. It doesn't mean that his soul is greater than mine. Perhaps his soul is greater, and therefore bonding with that person, helping that person, I'm bonding with a godly soul that's far greater than my soul. Furthermore, they are actually all equal, and not only equal, yet separate, but furthermore, they all have one Father, one source, and within their source, they all comprise one entity, says the Rebbe. It's impossible for me to judge people and evaluate what's in it for me if I am allowing my godly soul to rule, because by looking at the godly soul, bonding, helping, connecting with someone else, I might connect with myself. I might connect with something that's greater than me. It is an account of this common root in the one God that all of Israel are called brothers in the full sense of the word, and not only figuratively in the sense of relatives or similar in appearance and the like. Only, says the Rebbe, the bodies are distinct from each other. This explains how it is at all possible to demand that one love his fellow as he loves himself. Self-love is innate, natural to men. Love for one's fellow is not. How can a generated love match a natural one? According to the principle stated here, this is readily understood. One Jew need not create a love for another. The love is an inborn characteristic of his soul, on account of his root in godliness, which is common to all souls. It is as natural as the love between brothers. Just like nobody is asking me, how come are you too cold? Heidi, it's too cold for you? Okay, good. Just like between brothers, siblings, sisters, and brothers, we love them not because of their appearance, not because of what they do for us. It's natural to love. Of course, we know some people disagree and some people are not acting nicely towards one another, but the proper way, the natural, normal way is to have a bond and love between siblings. When there is no love, you have to find a reason. You have to explain why. Says the rabbi, the souls all stem from one, from God. Therefore, we are brothers. So when God says, love your fellow as your friend, yourself, similarly on the outside, looking at the body, it's very difficult to do. But if you realize that your friend is just part of you, then it's natural. Says the Rebbe. Therefore, according to the principle stated here, this is readily understood. One Jew need not create a love for another. The love is an inborn characteristic of his soul on account of its root in godliness, which is common to all soul. It is as natural as the love between brothers. Therefore, says the Rebbe, there can be no true love and fraternity between those who regard their bodies as primary and their souls secondary, but only a love based on an external factor. If I care about my body, how do I get to be rich and to be happy and to be most honored and respected? Then I'm allowing my body to be the helm, to run my life. If I am running my life through the body, it's going to create a challenge for me to bond and connect with another person, because that person, only when he provides, there is an external factor. Only when they honor me, only when they assist me. But as soon as that's not there, I'm not in touch with those people, as opposed to following the soul. Since the body separates us from each other, whereas the soul is that which binds us together, the greater value one places on his body at the expense of his soul, the more conscious he is of the differences between himself and his fellow. These differences require that he create a love for his fellow. And as said above, a created love can never equal a natural innate love. Therefore, love between people who consider their bodies as primarily important must be only a love based on some external factor, in which case the love is A, limited to the importance of the motivating factor, and B, destined to endure only as long as that factor is valid. I hope I made myself clear. Says the Rebbe, up to now. In other words, what the rabbi is saying is that actually, let's see it in Hillel. I am going to continue. Let's read the rabbi's interpretation. Up to now, the Alter Rebbe has discussed the mitzvah of loving one's fellow and its own merits. He now proceeds to discuss the value of this mitzvah as the basis of all the commandments, thereby elucidating yet further the importance of rejoicing with the joy of the soul alone. In other words, until now, the rabbi is talking about the mitzvah of loving a fellow as myself, explaining that we are one family, brothers, not figuratively, but for real. Now the rabbi is going to address another thing. We are studying, Hillel told, as I'm going to share in a moment, that the entire Torah, 613 commandments, are all inclusive in one mitzvah. Love your fellow as yourself. Says the Rebbe, the Talmud relates that it was Hillel the elder who authored the well-known statement that Ahavat Israel, the love of one's fellow Jew, is the basis of the entire Torah. Hillel had been approached by a Gentile who declared that he wished to convert to Judaism, but only if Hillel would teach him the entire Torah while he stood on one foot. Hillel replied, "What is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow. That is the whole Torah. The rest is but commentary." A man wanted to convert. He comes to Hillel, "I want to convert if you teach me the whole Torah while I stand on one foot," meaning just for a few minutes. Hillel says, "No problem. Stand on one foot." When he did it, he says, no, whatever you hate done to you, don't do unto to others. He says that's the entire Torah. All the commandments are commentary, are interpretation of that mitzvah. An obvious difficulty presents itself. All mitzvot fall into either of two categories. A, ben adam lachavero, between man and man, and ben adam lamakom, between man and God. It is readily understood how all the mitzvot of the former category, A, may be motivated by one's love of his fellow. But how can this love motivate one to fulfill any of the mitzvot belonging to the latter category and to observe Shabbat, for example? Alter Rebbe's answer follows from his previously stated principle that the essence of Ahavat Israel lies in giving priority to one's soul rather than to his body. This indeed is the basis of the entire Torah, as the Alter Rebbe continues. Let me summarize and show you some other answers. The man asked to convert. Hillel, with a short period, Hillel told him, whatever you don't hate done to you, don't do unto to others. That's the entire Torah. Everything else is commentary. The question is, the Torah has two categories of commandments. One is between men and men. Don't steal, don't cheat, don't lie. These are commandments that God required us in our relationship to others. Then there is another category of mitzvot are between us and God. Keep kosher, celebrate Shabbat, bring sacrifices when the temple was stood, celebrate Shavuot, celebrate Passover. Now, the Hillel's explanation can explain the category of between men and men, but it cannot explain the commandments between men and God. Rashi says two answers very briefly. One, Rashi says he meant to say majority of the mitzvot is commentary. In other words, Rashi said, he says to him, whatever you hate done to you, don't do unto to others. It's the majority of the commandments. The rest is commentary. But there will be extra mitzvot you need to study, aside from the mitzvah of loving a fellow. The second explanation Rashi gives is that your friend, the Hillel referred to, is God. Whatever you don't like done unto you, don't do unto to others, others refers to God. In other words, just like you like that all your desires be accommodated, be fulfilled, God has desires. And therefore, being Jewish, you convert, you must accept God as you fellow, either master or father, and therefore you have to make sure that whatever he desires is fulfilled. And that includes both categories, man to man and man to God. I saw today another commentator, and I want to say the name of the author, called Sama de Chaye. Sama de Chaye explained that the man knew about all the commandments, but he told Hillel, this is called drash. He told Hillel he wants to convert to Judaism and be able to fulfill all 613 commandments in one lifetime. Now, it's impossible to fulfill all the commandments in one lifetime because some of the commandments apply to a Kohen, some of them apply to a Levi, some apply to a firstborn, some apply to a female, some apply to a king, some apply to a Sanhedrin. There are mitzvot that impossible for one human being to fulfill all of them in a lifetime. And that's why there is the idea of reincarnation, which we are not going to talk about. But part of the reason is because every human being, every soul must fulfill all 613 commandments before they can return to God. And therefore, we're given different opportunities in different bodies. So we have different opportunities to fulfill the mitzvot. Sometimes we come in a body of a male, sometimes a female, sometimes a Kohen, sometimes a Levi, sometimes a firstborn, sometimes into a Kohen, a high priest, etc. This man turned to Hillel and he says, I want to be able to be connected to God and serve God with all 613 commandments while I stand on one foot. Foot meaning one lifetime. Regel is foot, but also Gilgul is reincarnation. It's almost the same root. It's not the same. In other words, in one lifetime I want to do it. Hillel says to him, it's very simple. bond with the entire Jewish people. When you bond with them, they will share all their good deeds with you. So this way, the Kohen will give you the mitzvot of his doing. The Levi will give you the mitzvot, your wife, your daughter, your sister, the king, the high priest. In other words, that's why it's such a powerful explanation that I want to share, is that when we bond with a fellow, they are happy to share with us their good deeds, what their share in the universe. So we are able to achieve much greater connection to God by bonding. That's why joy is number one in everything. It's the foundation to every relationship with God. Because by having joy, true joy that stems from the soul, we are bonding with a fellow human being. Once we understand that that fellow human being would be very happy to share all their credit, and therefore we are becoming one unit. So the greater the unit is, the more people do our bonding, the more good deeds, not in the pool as a whole, but as individuals. Because what Hillel said to him, that's the entire Torah. That's how you connect with the entire Torah. I want to continue. Now the Rebbe is going to address this question and answer it from a spiritual, Kabbalistic point of view. And let me give you an introduction. I'll share with you the Rabbi is saying. Very simply put, the Rabbi is saying that the whole reason God gave us the Torah, every single mitzvah in the Torah was given to us for one purpose, and that is to elevate the soul and put the soul in charge. Once you put the soul in charge, you are bonding with God. You're making the right choices. You connect with a fellow human being. You're trying to assist and help whenever you're called for. You are there to make other people live a good, full life. And therefore, he says to him, you know what the entire Torah is? The whole Torah is to be realized that the soul comes before the body. How do you do that? In what mitzvah? It spells out more than any other mitzvah. Whatever you don't like done unto you, don't do unto others. In other words, put other people in the same level as your needs. You need to lower your body and the animal soul and raise your godly soul. Once you allow your godly soul to rule, you will be there for another person. You will ask another person what hurts, and you will see what their needs are, and in that way you bond with them. Therefore, God gave us Passover. God gave us the mitzvah to study Torah. God gave us the mitzvah to pray. All that is an energy shot to the godly soul. What's the reason do we need the godly soul to be strong? To serve God, to do what God wants. So the primary reason God had sent us here is to allow for the godly soul to be at the helm, to control and drive the human. And by being able to put my godly soul first, I will do that. And to give the godly soul more boost, more energy, you eat kosher, you celebrate Shabbat, you love a fellow person as yourself, you keep Passover. All that is an energy boost to the soul, to the godly soul. Did I make myself clear? Ali? I want to make sure before I start reading. Okay, so this is what the Rabbi is going to talk about.
Is not just the Jew to Jew, correct? I mean, it's a fellow. I mean, you said once Jew to Jew, but it's really everybody.
Hillel did not even talk about a Jew. He says, what don't you like done to you, don't do unto others. However, the rabbi's point of view is the godly soul, and the godly soul is in the Jew. The whole point. The rabbi is going to address the answer from a godly soul point, and the godly soul is a soul that was given to a Jew. Let's get to the reading. This explains Hillel the elder's statement concerning the fulfillment of this mitzvah. Hillel says this is the entire Torah, the rest is but commentary. For the basis and root purpose of the entire Torah is to elevate and exalt the soul high above the body to God, the source and root of all worlds. And therefore, says the Rebbe, and also to draw down the infinite light of the Ein Sof into the community of Israel, as will be explained further, meaning into the fountainhead of the souls of all Israel, so that the one God will reside within Israel, but only insofar as they are one that is united. But this indwelling of the light of the Ein Sof in the community of Israel is impossible if there is disunity between the souls. God forbid, for God does not dwell in an imperfect, fragmented place. So do we say in our prayers, bless us, our Father, all as one with the light of your countenance, indicating that the light of God's countenance can be revealed only when we are united all as one, as explained elsewhere at length. And let's continue reading because I think we can finish our chapter today. In other words, what the rabbi is saying is that when we allowed the whole Torah, every mitzvah God gave us, between man and man or man and God, is just to allow to empower the godly soul. When we empower the godly soul, we please God. When we please God, God is blessing us. Because when we're fragmented, when I think about my body, I'm separate from the rest of the society, of the community, God will not bless us. God will bless us when we are together. Since every Jew has a divine soul, and since the commandment to love one's fellow is based on the essential unity of the souls, it follows that this commandment applies to every Jew without exception. In fact, however, we find the Talmud exhorting us to hate certain fellow Jews. How do we reconcile these apparently contradictory requirements? The Alter Rebbe proceeds to clarify. So the Rebbe will, okay, let's continue reading and I'll explain. As for the Talmudic statement that if one sees his friend sinning, he should hate him and should also relate the fact to his teacher so that he too will hate him, how does this conform with what we just said? Says the Rebbe, this applies only to one's companion, one's equal in the study of Torah and the observance of mitzvot. The Rebbe goes on to say, and that's number one. The sinner in question is a Torah observant scholar, but has lapsed in this one instance. In this case, his sin is much more severe than usual, since it is written that even the inadvertent misdeeds of a scholar are as grave as deliberate sins. But even this general assumption of the gravity of his conduct is not sufficient cause to hate him. As the Alter Rebbe continues, yet another condition must be first satisfied. And the Rabbi continues on page 438. He has also fulfilled with him, with the sinner, the injunction, you shall repeatedly rebuke your friend. The word used here for your friend, amitecha, also indicate, as the Talmud points out, im she'itcha, he who is on a par with you in the Torah and the mitzvot, who nevertheless has not repented of his sin, as is written in Sefer Charedim. At this point, there is no need to exaggerate the gravity of his sin. It is clearly a deliberate transgression. The Rabbi is telling us there is a mitzvah to rebuke. Up to a point, if I rebuke and someone does not listen, to hate that person. The Rabbi says, but there are three conditions. A, it must be an observant Jew who follow all the commandments, and in one of them he does not. That's when we must rebuke him, and if he's not listening, to hate him. But someone who is not careful and perfect in all the commandments, there is no mitzvah to hate him. Quite the opposite. Number two, that person must be a friend, a colleague, someone on the same level. Number three, only hate the person after you have rebuked him several times and he disobeyed. However, therefore, Anyone else who is not to that level, A, is not as observant with all the commandments or majority of the commandments. B, is not my colleague on the same level. C, I did not rebuke him for so many times. Then there is no allowance for hate, because loving a fellow Jew is a commandment, as Hillel said, is the all-inclusive, all the Torah. But as to one who is not his companion, his equal in the Torah and the mitzvot, so that as our sages concerning the ignorant in general, even his deliberate transgressions are regarded as inadvertent acts, since he is unaware of the gravity of his sin, nor is he on an intimate terms with him. Not only is one not enjoyed to hate him. On the contrary, he must in fact strive to become closer to him, as the Alter Rebbe states shortly. Says the Rebbe, this is the first. Remember, I asked you about the three artists, and the first one painted a perfect painting of that prince. There was a famous Chassid by the name of Reb Zusha of Anipoli. Reb Zusha once a man that came to visit his Rebbe, the Mezritcher Maggid, and Reb Zusha, as a holy man, saw on the face of the person that he had committed many, many grave sins. So he started yelling at him, "What are you doing here to defile my Rebbe?" And the man heard and walked away. After he left, Reb Zusha felt remorse. He said to himself, maybe I pushed the man away instead of connecting him and trying to influence him. So he came into his Rebbe, the Mezritcher Maggid, and he asked him for a tikkun, to fix it. And the Mezritcher Maggid put his hands on his head and he says, I bless you that you will never see negativity in a fellow human being. And from that moment on, Reb Zusha never saw something bad. He never saw anything negative. That's one way the rabbi is talking about. In other words, the rabbi says that the exception is so far because there are so many conditions that must be met. Anyone else, instead of looking at the misconduct, we look at their soul. And their soul is perfect. Therefore, they must be perfect. As the rabbi is going to continue on.
So is that the picture? Meaning
That's the
picture is
first painting, which is, there is no deficiencies. There is no such thing. It's perfect. Yes. Says the Rebbe. Therefore, on the contrary of this situation, Hillel said, be one of distinct disciples of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing peace, loving creatures and drawing them near to the Torah. Says the Rebbe, this usage of the term creatures in reference to human beings means that even those who are far from God's Torah and His service, for which reason they are classified simply as creatures, indicating that the fact that they are God's creatures is the sole virtue, even those one must attract with strong cords of love. Perhaps thereby one will be able, after all, to draw them close to the Torah and the service of God. And even if one fails in this, he has not forfeited the merit of the mitzvah of neighborly love, which he has fulfilled by his efforts in this direction. So that's the first thing the rabbi is saying. Realize that when you approach a fellow human being, you see only the positive. They were created with God. And if they're Jewish, they possess a godly soul. And that godly soul is pure and maybe even greater than me. And therefore, God wants me to bond, to connect, to serve, to help them, to bring them joy. That's my service of God. That's the reason I keep the Torah. God gave me all the commandments to be able to serve Him by connecting with other people. And then I'm drawing more of God's blessings when we are united. Now the Rabbi is going to go to another point. But is it possible to love a person and hate them at the same time? I'm sorry. Furthermore, even those who one is enjoined to hate, for they are close to him, and he has rebuked them, but they still have not repented of their sins. one is obligated to love them too. This is the rabbi is talking about Rabbi Yitzchak Berditchev, the second rabbi. The second rabbi would see the negativity, but convert it into positive. Reb Zusha didn't see anything negative. There are a few stories about Reb Zusha. One of them, one chassid came to the Mezritche Maggid, to the Rebbe, and say, how is it possible for me to have joy if I'm challenged with so many challenges? He had struggle from his wife, from his children, from his making a living. So his Rebbe says, go to Anipoli and find my Reb Zusha. He will teach you. He goes, he looks around, he traveled to Anipoli, to the town of Anipoli. He asked, do you have anybody heard of Reb Zusha? Reb Zusha, they never heard of Reb Zusha. So he keeps digging and prying. Finally, he says, oh, you mean Zusha? Yeah, he lives in the last house, the house that has not 4 walls. It's only 2 walls because the other 2 fell and they are supported, 2 walls, so supporting each other. So he knocks on the door. And a man opens up and says, are you Zusha? He said, yeah. He says, my Rebbe sent me to spend time with you. He said, oh, if the Rebbe sent you, please, you're my guy, you're my family member. He comes in, he sees there is rain coming through the roofs, and there is no table. Even milk crate he didn't have. And he's sitting on a bunch of hay, a bundle of hay. And then came the night, and he asked Reb Zusha, where are we going to sleep tonight? He says, I'm going to give you my hay. He gives him a little bit of hay, and he lies down. Reb Zusha is sitting on the floor, on the muddy floor, he's sleeping. In the morning, he turned to him and he says, the story goes on, question, but he says, now I understand. I'm sorry, he turns to Reb Zusha and he says, how are you living that way? Reb Zusha said, I don't know why. I'm very happy. God is providing me with all my needs. I'm missing nothing. So he said to himself, now I understand why the Rebbe sent me to spend time with you, because I have seen how the materialistic goods or lack thereof should not affect a human being. And he has learned a lesson. Reb Zusha saw no wrong, nothing bad. Nothing is going bad because he's connected with God. God had sent him, gave him a Rebbe, gave him Torah to study. What else does he need? He was always in good. Rabbi Steinmetz would see negativity but convert it into positivity. There's a famous story. A man, very quick 2 stories. A man wearing talit and tefillin were greasing the wheels of the carriage that he had, which is a disgrace. You don't do it with talis and tefillin. And Reb Zusha, so somebody pointed it out to the rabbi. So Reb Zusha turned to him and says, God, you see, even when they take care of their carriages, they don't forget about you. They make sure that they wear talis and tefillin. Another one is a man at the age of 80 converted, moved to Christianity. And somebody pointed out to Rabbi Yitzchak Berditchev, and he turned to them people and says, look how holy the man is. For 80 years he fought his temptation. Can you imagine to fight temptation to convert for 80 long years? He must have stored himself large reward by God. In other words, he saw negativity, but he always turned it honestly, all within him, he only found positivity. That's the second way. So when I see a person that has negativity, I need to find something that the positivity of it, and realize that that person's challenges are greater than mine, that connecting with that person might influence them, and it's all for good. Now the rabbi is going to talk about the third one. Remember the one who's riding on the horse? That's the Rebbe. But it is possible to love a person and hate him at the same time. The Alter Rebbe explained that since the love and the hatred stem from 2 different causes, they do not conflict. I want to share with you very briefly what the rabbi is going to talk about. The rabbi is going to say, sometimes you can separate a firewall within another person's love and the other person hate. You can love a person, but hate their conduct, hate their addiction, hate their behavior, but it doesn't change from you real deep love for that person. And therefore, when I see someone who is not behaving properly, we have the same mitzvah to love him as if I love Moses or my own spouse. The fact that he is not behaving, hate the conduct, but don't hate the person. The Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, somebody spoke negatively about the Rebbe because they felt the Rebbe spoke against them. And once the Rebbe told the Chassid to relate that the Rebbe never speak about people, he speaks about topics. He was very much against a topic, a situation that was taking place, but never speaks about the people. He always loved those people. In 1990, there was a long story. There was a politician that the Rebbe personally stood up against and made sure that he should not be elected as prime minister. Later, the Rebbe sent a message to that man, saying to him, he should know that the Rebbe was fighting the idea that he represented, but not the person himself, because the idea represented the Rebbe prevented from happening, which is for the benefit of the person himself. But he as a person is a good person, and the Rebbe likes him, loves him too. And here is what the Rebbe is going to say. And both the love and the hatred are truthful emotions in this case, since the hatred is on account of the evil within them, while the love is on account of the good hidden in them, which is the divine spark within them that animates their divine soul. For this spark of godliness is present even in the most wicked of one's fellow Jew. It is merely hidden. We're going to skip the commentary. One must also arouse compassion on the divine soul of the sinner, for in the case of the wicked, it is in exile within the evil of the Sitra Achra which dominates it. Says the Rebbe, when someone sins, not only I have to love the person, I have to have mercy on that person. Compassion banishes hatred and arouses love, as is known from the verse, Jacob who redeemed Abraham. The Talmud tells us, the Torah, the Medrash tells us, Abraham was kind. Comes Jacob and was completely successful because Abraham is kindness, Yitzchak, Isaac is severity, Jacob is merciful or compassion. Compassion is able to redeem even when kindness is not able to. That's why Abraham was not so successful with all his children. One child turned away. Jacob had all his children turned to be good people. As for the statement by King David, peace upon him, I hate them with a consummate hatred, reserving no love for them whatsoever. This refers only to Jewish heretics and atheists who have no part in God of Israel. As stated in Talmud, beginning chapter 16, Tanya Chabad. Any sinner who is not, however, a heretic must not be hated with a consummate hatred, for the mitzvah of Ahavat Israel embraces him as well. So what the Rabbi is saying, that the real true way of loving a fellow is not to hide the truth. There is some negativity. Don't let them be fooled to think that with the negativity can get away and it's accepted. But it doesn't change from the fact that I love that fellow. Because loving a fellow Jew is the essence of all the Torah. It's the essence of bonding with God. It's bringing blessings. At the same time, I can turn to that person and say to him, out of great love, I want you to know that this conduct is not the right way. You're not serving God. And there are countless stories of Hasidim who were able to use it to bond with people, even though those persons hated them or those persons despised God, but with great love, they bond with them and they were able to, so to say, lower the wall or break the wall completely and connect with people. And this concludes chapter 32. So that's the third picture. The third picture is you use the negativity for a benefit. You use the scope. You need only one eye. And the second, all three are correct, right? So the first correct is Reb Zusha, who saw no negativity. The second is Reb Levi Yitzchak Barditchev, who turned the negativity into positive. That's why I put the portrait from the side. And the third one is the Alter Rebbe, who says, love the person, hate the negativity. Well, thank you very much, and we'll continue next week, God willing. Bye.